So here's Prabhupada's translation and purport for Bhagavatam 3.6.36. This is Maitreya Muni speaking. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. So, Prabhupada's purport for this verse. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified, and as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is a proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period, but when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from one's spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the Lord's service. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech, whereas the Ekadandi sannyas takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord are, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself, and thus while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although the devotee remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. Prabhupada ki jai. So, the first word here is tatapi, which means even so. And of course, that refers back to the previous verse where Maitreya said, Etakshatar bhagavato daiva karmatma rupinaha kakshadadhyarupa kartum yogamaya balodayam. O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So having said that, asked that rhetorical question, who is able to actually approach or describe properly or measure the Lord's potency, then Maitreya says in this verse, nonetheless, or even so, literally, tatapi, even so, kirtiyam yanga yatamati yatashutam, that I will now glorify the Lord. And then he says yatamati, which means according to my realization. and then yatha shrutam, according to what I have heard from authorities. So we find the same phrase in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, spoken by Sutta. When Sutta tells the sages at Naimisharanya he's going to tell them what he heard from Shuka, Shava Yishyami Yata Dhitam Yatamati. Basically the same thing. He says, I'm going to teach you, or I'm going to explain to you what I heard from Shuka, my guru Shuka. I'm going to explain it yatha dhitam, literally, as I heard it or as I studied it, and yatamati, according to my realization. According to my realization and according to my understanding. So, clearly, the process of teaching Krishna consciousness requires both serious study. We have to actually hear and understand what the previous authority, in our case, Srila Prabhupada, what the previous authority has taught, and at the same time, we must present what we have heard with realization. It's that realization that allows us to take that same knowledge and translate it for a particular audience, according to time, place, and audience. This is we find a few times in the Bhagavatam the phrase Desha Kala Vibhagavit. One has to know, we find it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and again in the Bhagavatam. I believe that the Bhagavatam is 4.854, that one has to understand the differences of place and time. Different times and different places are different. And if you look at Prabhupada's purports to these verses, where that phrase is used, Desha Kala Vibhagavit, Prabhupada takes advantage of those phrases to emphasize in his purports the need to present Krishna consciousness appropriately in a particular time and in a particular place. Prabhupada also says that there's a letter he wrote saying that if you do present Krishna consciousness appropriately, then people will accept it. So, of course, as we know, it's not easy to spread Krishna consciousness, especially in this age. However, still, we find that where we present Krishna consciousness appropriately, people do accept it. Not everyone, but the movement grows. So Maitreya begins Tatapi, despite my limitations or despite the infinite extent of the subject matter, Kirtayam Yanga, I will preach, I will glorify the Lord, Yatamati Yatashrutam, according to my realization and as I've heard from authorities. And he says, I'm going to speak on Kirting Hare Song Satkartum. He says, my purpose is Satkartum, to honor, literally to make real, Satkartum, to honor the Lord's own glories. I'm going to glorify the Lord, to make real or to make present the Lord's own glories. And he says, because using my power of speech, Giram, which is Anyabhidha Satim, which, if it is engaged to speak otherwise, Anya Abhidha, that speech would be asatim. It would be unreal, or as Prabhupada puts it here, unchaste. The word sati, of course, sati is just the feminine of the word sat. Sat, literally in Sanskrit, means being. It's the present participle being, but of course participles are verb forms that act as nouns. So just as in English, you could say, I am being serious. Being is a verb form, but it's used as a noun as in a living being. And so same thing in Sanskrit. So sat, literally being or existing, but it comes to mean, it comes to be used also as an adjective, like, for example, in satsanga, the association of people who are existing truthfully or who are engaged in a real way. So sat means real, it means existing, it means proper, it means good, it can mean various things. And kartum is just the Sanskrit infinitive to do, to make or to do, kartum. So it's just like in English, it's used in the sense of a purpose, like I am going to see what I can see. So here, Maitreya uses it in the purpose sense of the infinitive, sat kartum. In other words, my purpose is to make sat, to make the Lord's own glories sat. In other words, to make them apparent, to make them they're already real, but to make them real for other people, you could say. And so the word sati is often used to mean a chaste woman, sati being just the feminine of sat. And so Prabhupada therefore translates asati as unchaste. So sat and asati clearly go together here since they're the same word. Just that sati is given in the feminine form. Sat is given in the neuter form grammatically just because it's in a compound, but that's too much grammar probably. Anyway, but it's the same word, sat kartum asati. So the idea is that Maitreya will glorify the Lord, speak his glories to make them real for the audience, because if he spoke otherwise, his speech would be unreal, asati. So it's interesting here that in order to make the Lord's glories real for the audience, I mean, they are real, but they may not be real for a particular group of people. So that's what it means to spread the Sankirtan movement. It means to take the glories of Krishna and to make them real, to show the reality of them to a particular audience. And that, of course, requires effective communication, and effective communication requires realization. That Prabhupada said, not just parroting blindly, but deeply understanding the philosophy. And one who deeply understands it sees the universality of it, and one who sees the universality of it, that this is universal knowledge, is able to make it real for other people. But if we think it is a partial knowledge, there's a very heavy quote from Bhakti Siddhanta and Bhakti Vinod, who wrote a book together, saying that if in the name of Vaishnavism we become sectarian, then that's the worst form of Vaishnavism. In that case, we actually are not seeing ourselves. We are not seeing that Krishna is for everyone. As Krishna says, Ishwarak sarva bhutanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati. I'm the Lord of all living beings in their heart. Sarvasya chaham shri sannivishta. I'm in the heart of everyone. So we have to see how this knowledge is universal. And when we see that, when we see Krishna in everyone, then we will find a way to communicate with people, and the Hare Krishna movement, even in the Western world, will actually grow. The growth of the Western Hare Krishna movement will be a necessary symptom that those who are preaching in the West have actually understood the universal character of Krishna consciousness and are able to explain that effectively according to their own realization. So there may be questions. So I mean, that's basically what the words mean here in the Sanskrit. And Prabhupada, of course, explains it very nicely. I haven't spoken that long yet, but there may be questions or points that you want to make. So are there, Ramananda?
Okay. Maharaj, you have to let me unmute everybody.
Sure.
So hold on.
I know they're all tied up and muted, and down in a.
Okay. All right. That was Prabhu. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yeah. There's a lot of static in the words.
Oh, I couldn't find my mute button. I've always got questions. I just unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of static coming from your end.
From mine?
I
think
think- There you go. Okay, now we're all right.
Oh, okay. So, what does it mean by pure consciousness? What is impure consciousness versus pure consciousness?
Okay. What is pure consciousness and what is impure consciousness? Well, pure anything, of course, means that it's only that and nothing else. It's like pure water means there's only water and then there's nothing else in the water. There's nothing that's not water, sometimes called distilled water. If we look up the word pure in the dictionary, not mixed or adulterated with any other substance or material, without any extraneous and unnecessary elements, free of any contamination, wholesome and untainted by immorality, especially that of a sexual nature. So,
I guess my question is going to, isn't it our understanding that the consciousness itself can never actually become impure?
well,
Sort of,
the word
filtered or covered?
Well, no, Krishna, no, it is covered. It's not, it cannot transform into something else, but it's covered. Krishna uses that word several times in the Gita, avritam, covered.
Become.
Yeah, avritam, consciousness is covered. Prabhupada gives the example of a diamond that falls into the mud and is covered by the mud. The pure diamond is still there, but it's covered. So our consciousness is covered, but within that covering, the pure consciousness is still there. Just like the traffic light is, within the so-called red, yellow, and green light, behind the red, yellow, and green screen or covering, there's simply pure white light. So now we have male or female consciousness, young or old, animal, human, because our consciousness is coming through the covering of a body. But within that same pure consciousness exists eternally. And that's why Krishna says if one finds oneself within, then one discovers that pure consciousness. But the mixture is because Krishna describes as dvandva moha, the illusion of duality, because we want to enjoy something and we want to avoid something else, material. Therefore, our consciousness becomes covered by that attachment and aversion. So purity means to free oneself from attachment and aversion. Then pure consciousness in its original state manifests.
Nice.
So, any other points?
Yeah, Maharaj, in this whole section that we're reading right now is about the universal forms. Could you, I've asked this to a few different devotees, so I wanted to get your take on it. Could you explain what is meant by the Hiranyagarbha form of the Lord?
Hiranyagarbha. What does the Bhagavatam say?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually just really confused about it. I understand that it's something to do with maybe one aspect of the universal form. It's one of the forms of the Lord that Lord Brahma worships. I'm just confused.
Well, Hiranyagarbha literally means golden womb. So it is, I mean, Garbo, there's a Garbo Dakshay Vishnu, who is the, and the universe comes out of his, so to speak, his womb, or from the navel lotus. Brahma's born and the universe comes. So, yeah, if you could provide some references in the Shastras, I could take a look at them, but I have to admit that Hiranyagarbha is not something I've studied a lot.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they might have?
Yes, there's another part of the purport that's kind of interesting. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. So the idea of being unchaste is not, you can go on strike in a way and be unchaste. You try to, the impersonal idea comes up later in the purport, the impersonal idea of just simply being engaged in an attempt to become one, rather than dedicating mind, words, thoughts, and actions, as the Vaishnava sannyasis are meant to do with the Tridanda.
Yes, chaste. The word chaste means, it can mean abstaining from extramarital or from all sexual intercourse. I mean, the word kama in Sanskrit means desire, literally means desire. Just like, for example, Krishna is called Gopi Kanta. Kanta is just the past participle of kama. So the beloved or the desired of the gopis. So the kama, in the simplest sense, it literally means desire, but it also comes to mean sexual desire or lust. So in that sense, to have chaste consciousness means not to let the consciousness become intimately involved with something unreal. If you think of it, a chaste woman or a chaste man, the idea of not having an extramarital affair, but the more general idea is not to have improper intimacy with the wrong person. So in that sense, obviously all of us, as we live in the world, we see and hear and touch so many material things. But the idea of chaste consciousness indicates that we should not develop an intimate relationship or attachment to material things, because in that sense our consciousness would become unchaste. One of the meanings of chaste is undefiled or stainless, so unchaste would be defiled or stainless, contaminated. So I hope that helps.
Well, I should sense that there's something that I think it's really important that we understand the essence of our philosophy, and so much of the preaching. I was wondering how you handle this, where it says that since the Lord is absolute, there's no distinction between Him and His glories. Now, I think we could substitute in between Him and His name. But that's a difficult thing to explain, that how God and His name are non-different. Binatam namanamino.
Oh, I think it's not.
How do you
help
communicate that?
Well, first of all, I
that.
explained to people that what we're really talking about here is philosophy of language. And if we look at the intellectual history, even of the Western world, we find, for example, in Plato's dialogue called the Cratylus, Cratylus. In Plato's Cratylus, Plato raises the question of, can there be a special relationship between a name and that which it names? Can there be a special relationship where somehow the name or the word is more than just an extrinsic reference, but actually somehow is the thing itself? And someone's in a bird paradise there. So also, If we look at world religions, the idea that God is present in his name is found throughout world religions. It's not just something that came from India. To give an example, if you look at the Old Testament, the events surrounding the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, it said frequently that the temple in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, was built as a temple to the name of God, that as God lives in heaven, so God lives in the temple as his name. And in Hebrew they say, Baruch Shem Kavod, blessed is the holy name. And so the idea of a holy name is found also in, of course, in Christianity. There's, I think, a holy name college or something.
Hallowed be thy name.
Yeah, hallowed, yeah. So, but even there's, so they have the concept, the term holy name. So what does it mean to be holy? It means to have the quality of God. So also in Buddhism, that Nam Myoho Renge Kyo thing, that's the name. So if you look at, and of course in Vaishnava tradition, so if you look at world religions, it's a universal understanding that God is present in God's name. So I don't find it very difficult to explain it to people. It's something which mystics and spiritualists and religious people have figured out in all traditions for many thousands of years.
What is the exact translation of that Buddhist chant you were just doing? Because I've heard that, but I've never.
Oh, I don't know the exact.
Never understood it.
Just the first word "nam" is name. I don't know the whole thing, but yeah, the idea that the name of the divine is holy and somehow the divine is present in the name that's something which is a universal understanding among spiritual people.
H.D.Goswami takes it like to the highest level. He's describing, Tunde Pandaviri, Tunda Panote, Tunda Anilapiye, Karna Kroda Kadamani Gatayate, Karna Bhuti Despriham. A beautiful verse. The Lord is just chanting he's dancing on our tongue when we chant. Therefore, we desire many mouths to chant, and many ears to hear. Shake the Prangana Sangini Vijayate Savindhirana, depending when he dances in the courtyard of the heart, that name just makes all the senses alert.
Yes, the name of Krishna, Harinama.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, during your class, you were mentioning how we are considered Vaishnavas, and you were saying how to be considered a Vaishnava. Actually, we are not really, in a sense, Vaishnavas, but we are more beyond that because we are representing Sanatana Dharma. But in general, most people think of us, Hare Krishna devotees, as Vaishnavas.
I think we're Vaishnavas. I always thought we were Vaishnavas.
Yes, we are Vaishnavas, but wouldn't that make us into some kind of religion anyway? In other words, like some sect?
Not necessarily. After all, Krishna in the Gita on several occasions refers to his devotees as Mad Bhakta, my devotees. And so in the Gita, all living beings are one, but at the same time, the devotees are a special community. This point comes up, the point you raised comes up frequently in the Bhagavatam, especially when when Krishna or Vishnu intervenes in the universe and supports the demigods or the devotees against the demons or the non-devotees. And the question is often raised, does this mean that Krishna is sectarian? So it's a concern voiced often in the Bhagavatam, and of course the answer is no. Krishna is actually reciprocating with everyone. The fact is that Krishna is God. He's just, someone has to be God, and it turns out to be Krishna. And we follow him. So are we a special community? Yes. Does that mean we should feel that we're better than other people? No, we shouldn't feel that we're better, but Krishna is God, and And we have recognized that fact. So recognizing that Krishna is God and not recognizing that Krishna is God are not exactly the same. There is some special value in understanding Krishna. And again, he refers to his devotees as a special community, even though he also says that all living beings are one. And that he requires us as devotees. Actually, not only should we not be proud, Krishna says in chapter 18 that samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakting labate parang. It is precisely those who see all living beings equally. If you see all living beings equally, then you achieve the highest bhakti. So to become a pure devotee of Krishna, one must see all living beings equally, and yet the devotees are a special community.
Mahesh Prabhu, what did you mean by we are beyond Vaishnava? And sometimes we talk about being beyond Brahmana in one sense, that, being Vaishnava trumps being a Brahmin. But what did you mean by we are beyond Vaishnava?
Well, we beyond Vaishnava means that actually we are not really a religion. That's what I always understood from reading Srila Prabhupada's books. We are not really a religion. We are Sanatana Dharma. We are the eternal religion, so to speak. We are not a sect.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, it depends on whether you're speaking philosophically or sociologically. I mean, sociologically, there is a group of people called Vaishnavas, and of course, what we would say is that Vaishnav Dharma is Sanatana Dharma. And I think that's what Prabhupada's real point is. Now, it's also possible to understand Vaishnav Dharma in a sectarian, crude way. And there's a danger of that because we are a community, because we do have a distinct identity, and because we do know that Krishna, that knowledge of Krishna is the highest knowledge. There's a real danger. There's a real danger that we become proud, that we become sectarian, envious of other people. The acharyas point out these dangers. So, but ultimately,
Isn't it what is going on right now, even within different sects of Vaishnavas? There's always so much argument. Well, my guru said this, and my guru said that, and there's always argument between followers of different camps of Vaishnavas. There's always argument about it.
I mean, there are some arguments going on. I'm even participating myself in a few arguments, but it's also a question of weeding the garden. Lord Chaitanya gives that example that by this mercy of Guru and Krishna, the seed of devotion is planted in the heart, and the creeper, bhakti lata, grows, but we have to take care of our garden. Weeds grow. And so even these weeds grow not only in the individual heart, weeds grow in a society, in a spiritual society. Weeds can grow. And also in any, as soon as you start a spiritual movement, some very sincere advanced people will join, and some people will join who are not that advanced. And so all the normal, or many of the normal human problems, people becoming proud, people fighting with each other, you find that in every human organization. If we limit a spiritual society to absolutely pure devotees, of course, who makes the judgment? It'll be a very small society anyway. So because of the human element, yes, these things go on. But sometimes, also it's like in science, they debate issues. And so, for example, right now there's a debate going on about the best way to present Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And as long as we all behave ourselves and everyone has good manners, it's a very healthy debate. Because we can become stale. We can become apathetic and just, close our eyes to the fact that our movement is not really doing that well in the Western world, among Western people. And so I think some healthy debate to get people thinking and to come up with creative new ideas is a good thing. So debate and discussion, even argument, is not always bad. It's necessary, like in science, to make sure that test different ideas and to make sure people are speaking logically. That doesn't mean necessarily we're sectarian. I think it's just, it can be, if done right, a very healthy, necessary process.
What about for the devotees accepting other people's beliefs or appreciating, let's say, other incarnations of God? What do you think about
Well,
that?
if someone says Jesus is the only way, they're just wrong. That's just plain wrong. It's just a fanatical statement, and it's wrong. So if someone says Jesus is great, Jesus is glorious, yeah, that's good. The positive things are good. If someone says Jesus is actually God, the creator, no, that's wrong again. Actually, if you look at the teachings of Jesus, he didn't say, I'm the creator, I created the world, I'm God. He never taught those things. So, or if someone says, for example, Allah wants me to blow up a school bus, that's wrong again. So, we can't go to one extreme or the other. One extreme is just to become fanatical, born again fool and say that, we have the only truth, no one else has the truth, no one else is worshiping God. That's obviously an ignorant, fanatical extreme. But there's an equally fanatical extreme on the other end where we just relativize everything. And so the middle position, which I think reflects reality, is that we do respect other people who are acting in respectable ways. And by that I mean they're virtuous, mode of goodness, or they have some sincere piety, they're trying to understand or serve God. Of course we respect that. But we can't go to the extreme of just relativizing everything, because then there's no truth at all. Then the only truth is that there's no truth.
Mhm.
Okay, Gervin, anything?
There's a nice verse that confirms that point from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, item 2117. It says, a sincere student should not neglect discussion of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus, one's mind becomes attached to Krishna. So I've always seen that to be useful if there's no malice involved, the etiquette, and saying nice is there, then there can be such nice ways to express realizations with each other.
What was the reference for that?
Hallelujah, chapter 2, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, text 117.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's I'm going to use that reference.
Yeah, thank you.
It's when we sometimes talk with Christians, I'm always uncomfortable saying, well, Jesus said this or Jesus didn't say that, because I always worry about the authenticity of the Bible. It's been translated and retranslated, et cetera, whereas we can speak so authoritatively from our scriptures.
Right. I think the problem is not the translation, because there are many scholars who read the Bible in the original language. So that's not really the issue. The issue is who wrote it. For example, we have evidence from the New Testament, the book of Acts of the Apostles, that virtually all of the early followers of Jesus, the followers who were with him during his life and actually literally followed him around, walked around with him, they were illiterate peasants. People like tax collectors, fishermen, these were very low-class people. And even in the New Testament, it's stated that they really didn't speak very well in terms of proper language. And so that's why we don't really get a New Testament until the next generation, and then generations following for some of the other Gospels. And it was written in Greek. Greek back then was English. It was the international language, at least in that part of the world. And so it's, quite some time later, not hundreds of years, but a generation later, before they really have members of their movement who can write books, or at least, write proper books. And so that's why we get the New Testament in Greek, not in the language that Jesus actually spoke. So that's the real issue. Or, for example, that the same incident is described in different ways. We have 4 Gospels, these 4 little biographies of Jesus. And, for example, take the incident where after Jesus is crucified and apparently put to rest in a cave, and then some of his followers go to the cave and he's not there. So they assume, or they believe he's risen. So if you look at the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you actually find 4 somewhat different accounts of that. And so that's why educated people know, if you take this as the literal, inerrant word of God, every word, then which one was it? Because you have 4 different descriptions. So this, people finally, it only took them over 1,000 years to actually notice that in the church, and or at least take it seriously. And so then, a couple of hundred years ago, this international academic project began, which is the search for the historical Jesus. Trying to figure out as far as possible, what did Jesus actually say? What did he really teach? So that's been the problem. The translation is nothing, because, like I said, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of scholars who read the text in the original language. It was the actual writing of the text which is problematic.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you speak to the tension between maintaining tradition, adhering from authority, and creativity and presenting Krishna consciousness in current times with the leadership of the GBC? And I know you're kind of involved in that, but
Yeah.
taking kind of to more a principle-based, it seems like we're taking words Prabhupada said 40, 50 years ago and taking them as being principles where they might have been according to time, place, and circumstance. And
that's
and it seems like with go ahead.
Well, that's exactly what it is. In a sense, ironically, I see myself as being the real conservative here, because, in a sense, the Prabhupada that's often presented to new devotees or young devotees is really a censored Prabhupada. Prabhupada basically, what we find is that conservative leaders present a conservative Prabhupada, whereas just by looking a little bit, I've found dozens and dozens of statements from Prabhupada. They're just all over the place. A very liberal Prabhupada who says over and over and over again that external details are not important. They're adjustable. We don't care about those things. What we really care about is just getting the job done, finding what works. That what works in India won't work in the Western countries. We have to make adjustments. We have to consider time and place. And so there's this huge liberal, there's this liberal Prabhupada that gives us all the freedom and flexibility we need to make the movement work in the Western world. And that Prabhupada has basically just been censored, or has been, or maybe, a lot of the people, devotees just don't even know Prabhupada said these things. It's either censorship, or it's just, people just don't know it. So this ultra-conservative Prabhupada, which some people want to keep in the center, it's just part of Prabhupada. There's a whole other Prabhupada that I want to keep alive, because that's the Prabhupada who gives us what we need to make his movement work. And now there's even, there's, in chapter 6 of the Nectar of Devotion, of course, Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Prabhupada explains that there are fundamental principles that you cannot change, and there are details that you can change. And so if you look at Rupa Goswami's list, he says nothing about Indian dress, Indian cooking, Indian architecture. There's nothing about that. And so the idea that, people say, who are you? People may say to me, who are you to change things? But actually, I'm just following the list. I'm just following Prabhupada, where he says that, things that aren't on that list are details. And so what I would ask is, who has the right to invent a new fundamental principle that the Acharyas never gave as a fundamental principle? So again, as that Adi Leela 2:117, I think this is healthy because I want to keep all of Prabhupada in the center. And now there's even a new philosophy among some leaders, amazingly enough, that actually, ISKCON is not meant to be a big movement in the West. And, a couple of leaders are saying, let's look at the Amish. Let's look at the Amish. They don't preach and make a lot of devotees, but they're nice. And, what about... Yeah, it is kind of laughable. And what about the pranam mantra Prabhupada wrote for himself? Paschatya Desha Tarine, savior of the Western countries. Sure, Prabhupada sometimes said, if I find one pure devotee, that'll be a success. But ultimately, he had much greater ambition than that. He had much greater ambition. He wanted to save the Western countries. Desha means country or land. And so how do you get around his pranam mantra and pretend that he didn't have that ambition? So it's interesting. There actually are people among us who would rather, who think that dress style is more important than saving the world. I mean, it's kind of amazing, but it seems to be true. And I mean, it would be very unfortunate if ISKCON becomes a society in which you are not your body, but you are your clothes.
That should be a bumper sticker. On that idea of principle and detail, it seems like it would be good to have some more education to be able to see how to figure out. So that the six Goswamis are expert scrutinizing the studying all the scriptures that shows the eternal religious principles. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says when you confuse the detail or try to make it a principle, that's how sectarianism and fanaticism is born.
Exactly.
So yeah, that hits it. So like they used to teach in school, how to bisect a sentence, predicate, and the verbs, all the different parts of a sentence. So it would seem like it would be nice to have a training to pick out which part of this is the principle and which part of it is the detail. And if that training to be able to see it, then it seems like there's so many of the arguments would be automatically taken care of by just recognizing the principles and the details. So is that, besides chapter 6 of the Nectar Devotion, is there some other place that speaks to that point?
Well, Prabhupada talks about it a lot, just in his own language, saying that, how things like dress or cuisine, like Indian food or Indian dress, is absolutely not essential. It's not the point. We're not concerned with that. We're concerned about consciousness. We're concerned about higher knowledge. And so Prabhupada, actually, I'm just finishing a paper now the next couple of days, which will be posted, and in which I'm trying to give a comprehensive view of all this. Actually, I just got another note where some sannyasi who is, anyway, Hare Krishna, there's all kinds. He's now saying to everybody that I left ISKCON, I formed a cult. I think that's the word he used, a cult. And so, I mean, you all know this. This is all very well known. The typical social psychology, where if you try to reform something or try to do something different, then some people inevitably will attack you. But yeah, I'm working on several papers. I just got back from a preaching tour 2 weeks ago. I'm just getting my strength back now to be able to do this.
Well, Hare Krishna, but don't you think that we have to make a differentiation here between preaching and community? Because when you are preaching, or when the devotees are preaching or going into the cities in order to preach and tell others about Krishna, it's a different thing than forming a community where the devotees are living together. And I was just discussing this in New York. I was in New York City for a few days, and I was discussing this with Hridayananda das Goswami, and I was saying that, in our movement, we are a preaching movement, but on the other hand, we have made our communities also a preaching center. And what happened is that if you open it to the public and everybody comes to your center where you have your families and the children are being taken care of, that there is a danger on that. There's a danger just to allow anybody to come into your community and to
I
mingle with
agree.
your children.
I mean, of course, of
I think we
course.
should separate that.
Yeah, of course, we have to take care of families and children, of course. At the same time, I personally, to be perfectly honest, I will confess right here in public that I do not feel more Krishna conscious when I wear Indian clothes. And, one of the reasons we lose so many of our children, frankly, is because children get, I mean, I agree with you, of course. I mean, children have to be protected and all that. But one of the reasons we lose so many of our children when they become adolescents is because at that age, children become extremely sensitive and attached to the opinions of their peers and what the world thinks about them. And frankly, when they realize, as many of them do, that they belong to a movement which is not respected, which is often ridiculed, they leave. And so I think one of the best ways to keep our young people is to be successful. So they're proud to be, I mean, if we don't even, I mean, it's a very well-known fact. I mean, everyone knows this, that a huge number of devotees, probably most devotees in the Western world, are somewhat embarrassed or hesitant to invite people to the local Hare Krishna temple. Now, when I was in Europe, I met many temple presidents who don't want to invite people to their own temples because they realize that it may be the end of that person's interest in Krishna consciousness. So if we are embarrassed about our own centers, which we are, I mean, frankly, I'd say most devotees, it's very hard to meet a devotee in the Western world that says, oh yeah, I'd love to invite people to our temples. It's very hard to find someone like that. So how can our children not be embarrassed if we're embarrassed? And I think the reason, so you have to say, what's the root cause of this embarrassment or the fact that our movement's not really successful, we're not winning? I think the root cause is that rather than present a pure spiritual science that people can relate to, we're presenting this extremely ethnic thing where, basically whatever words we speak, like just add Krishna to your life, in fact, the clear message, the body language, so to speak, is that you have to become intensely Indian in order to practice bhakti yoga. And now that I'm doing this Krishna West project, I get letters every day, often from, I'd say most of the time, from educated people, university professors, doctors, all kinds of people. And they all say the same thing. I like the philosophy, but I could never surrender because I didn't want to be an Indian. So I'm getting, there's just massive response to Krishna West among just people out in the world. So that's my belief. My belief is that, of course, we should have protected communities. We should have the best. That's another problem. You talked about children. What about the fact that for every school ISKCON builds, we build 50 temples with elaborate rituals and puja? ISKCON, there's so many things we need to fix. We have problems in ISKCON, and of course, I'm loyal to ISKCON because I'm loyal to Prabhupada. But we need to fix a lot of things. This movement has been anti-intellectual, almost anti-education, or just, this movement has had 100 times more enthusiasm to perform rituals and puja than it has to even educate our own children. Where are all the great schools? So you want to talk about keeping our children. it's not just about crazy people walking in the door and, and victimizing our children. Of course, we don't want that. But what it's really about, the real problem with our children is, number one, we don't have many good schools. And number two, we are an embarrassment to our children. So if you fix those two things, if we become an intelligent, appropriate, successful movement with great schools, I think you'll find that very, very few of our children will leave.
I can remember when people would ask Prabhupada about becoming Krishna conscious, there would be a question like, do I have to shave my head and move into the temple? And the response was always, no, you don't have to do those things. So, but it seemed like nobody really heard those answers because everybody had to shave up and move into the temple at the time. But I'm sure you remember those questions. Do I have to shave up to become Krishna conscious and move into the temple?
Yeah, we were all quite immature. And I was. I look back, youth is wasted on the young, as they say. Very happy that I dedicated my youth to the Sankirtan movement rather than just degrading myself, but I'm kind of like horrified at how immature I was back then. And there were no elders. We didn't choose to join a new movement. It just happened to be new. So now, yeah, go ahead.
What would it look like? Because with so many people, they think the only way I could be Krishna conscious is move in the temple and surrender to the authority and do what they tell me. What does the new model look like for someone who's Krishna conscious? What would his day and his activities, his consciousness look like?
Well, it's Prabhupada's program. For example, this morning I got up. I'm in a studio here in Los Angeles, not in an art studio. Just a one-room apartment. And I got up. I had my Mongol Arti. I read Shastra. I went out and chanted my rounds, offered some prasad to Krishna. It's Prabhupada's program. In fact, we're in the process of preparing to open a new Krishna West Center in San Luis Obispo, California. And where I want to really show a model. In Chapel Hill, we opened something, but because of various circumstances, it's a nice program, but we weren't able to show that example of a functioning spiritual center. But it's Prabhupada's program. You see, that's the whole thing. Who is it? My godbrother Prithu, my dear godbrother Prithu, did some kind of podcast where I'm the next Kirtananda. Actually, there are three things that Prabhupada said we shouldn't change, which are our philosophy, our basic spiritual practice, and our institution, as he set it up. And so I'm keeping all three of those intact. What does it look like? It looks like Prabhupada's movement. It's Prabhupada's spiritual program, it's Prabhupada's philosophy, it's Prabhupada's institution. It's just that you don't have to be Indian.
Well, the other thing is, as far as the society element goes, is one stick is easily broken, and many sticks, we had that analogy. So if they don't come together in a temple, if everybody does a home program, would they have enough strength, and how would they be recommended for initiation? The things that we're kind of used to like that.
Oh, no, you're right. We should have centers. We should have temples, we should have farms, schools, everything. It just doesn't have to be so Indian. I firmly believe, like I said, we're opening centers now, Krishna West centers, but it's all the same program. Mongol Arti, 16 rounds. What's that?
I'm morning, so there'll be that Srimad Bhagavatam class, the training japa, the Artik, and they just come in your regular clothes and that happens a lot of places anyway. People at work, all practically speaking, they come in the clothes they're going to go to work in.
Yeah. I think it's I'm not at all the first person to have this idea. Many people, many good devotees have figured these things out a long time ago. I'm just trying to systematize it so that we can actually we need a Western Hare Krishna movement. I know in yes, go ahead.
I heard you say in one talk, which I thoroughly enjoyed, by the way, in Israel, a recent talk, that the dhoti came that Bhakti Siddhanta borrowed that from the Ramakrishna mission.
Yeah, Sannyas Dhoti.
Oh, the Sannyas dhoti. Okay.
Yeah, if you look at BBT books, at paintings of Lord Chaitanya and the six Goswamis, they're not wearing an ISKCON Sannyas Dhoti. As far as the regular dhoti, it's just the word dhoti is not a Sanskrit word. It's not mentioned in any shastra. You know, the idea that, for example, a woman wears a sari, that's Vaishnavi dress. Never in the history of India was a sari considered Vaishnavi dress. That is something invented in ISKCON, that a sari, I mean, in India, people of all different religions, women wear saris. So the idea that a sari is a devotional dress, a Vaishnavi dress, is something which ISKCON invented. Or the idea that a dhoti is Vaishnava dress is an ISKCON invention. It has no historical, it has no history.
What did Lord Chaitanya wear?
Prabhupada, well, as a householder, Prabhupada wrote a letter in which he said he wore a dhoti because he was in West Bengal. And if you look around India, the dhotis are all different. So actually, ISKCON's invented devotional dress for men is just a Bengali dhoti. It's not even a South Indian dhoti. It's not a West Indian dhoti. It's just a Bengali dhoti. And Prabhupada's, besides, like for example, the Bhagavatam says that Krishna wears yellow dress. Doesn't say dhoti because it's just, you know, there's no shastra that mentions a dhoti. And so why don't we wear yellow if you want to dress like Krishna? And plus, whoever said, what shastra ever taught that in order to practice bhakti yoga, you have to imitate the spiritual world in the way you dress? I mean, where does that come from? That's not a principle of bhakti yoga. And yet you have all these leaders preaching that we should dress like that because it's a dress of the spiritual world, as if they knew. And it's, but what acharya, what shastra ever taught that? That the way you advance in bhakti yoga is dressing like Krishna.
I thought it was presented that it's kind of like a uniform. If you see a policeman, you know he represents the police force. So if you saw someone wearing a dhoti, he would come up to you and he could ask you about Krishna. He was part of your uniform.
Yeah, that's,
Like
I mean, yeah. But there are two very serious problems with that analogy. Logical problems. First of all, I like uniforms. I mean, when I was growing up, you know, I was really into sports. I like, you know, uniforms. But the problem is, number one, that uniforms are effective when people already accept the authority of the person in the uniform. For example, people accept the authority of policemen or firemen. They just need to know who's the fireman or who's the policeman. Or for example, let's say I'm in LA, so you go to a Dodger baseball game. Everyone goes there to see the game. So if you see someone in the Dodger uniform, you know he's on the team. You already came to see that team. But in fact, in the Western world, very, very, very few people accept us as authorities on God and soul. So it's not that people, actually, frankly, for most people, when they see our uniforms, what it tells them is not, here's the person I can ask about Krishna. It's the opposite. It tells them, avoid this person. And if you watch YouTube, you know, videos of Harinams in so many great Western cities, that's what it seems to indicate to people. To avoid these people. Another point about uniforms is that uniforms are specifically designed within a particular culture. That's why, for example, in the Western world, and increasingly, and actually all over the world now, police uniforms are basically military colors. You know, they're dark blue, or they're sometimes brown, or they're not red, they're not yellow. I mean, why is it that policemen only wear certain colors? Why is it that policemen, for example, when they're in uniform, don't wear shirts with like low necklines, or why don't they wear bell-bottom pants? Because a uniform is specifically designed within a particular culture so that it conveys a certain message. And actually, practically every religion in the Western world that uses exotic uniforms, none of them are growing, and all the religions that are growing don't use exotic uniforms. So again, the uniform idea is nice. I like uniforms, but for example, I don't know if you can see it here. I got this in Germany, Krishna. Oh, you can't see it. I'm on YouTube, actually. For those who are on Ustream, they can see it. I have a shirt on that says Krishna West in Germany. So people can identify me, but it's appropriate. It's a collar shirt. So uniforms are effective under two conditions. Number one, when people accept the authority of the uniformed person and just need to know who he is. And number two, when the uniform is appropriate within a particular culture. Our uniform does not meet either of those requirements. And therefore, I think the analogy doesn't really work.
When Prabhupada first came to America, they said to him, "Why don't you change and put on a suit and tie?" And he didn't. He said that I didn't come to take anything. I'm not a beggar. I came to give. And he says, and I never changed my dress.
Actually, that's another ISKCON myth. Because there's actually a quote from Prabhupada, which I have here. I'm using it in the paper I'm writing now, where Prabhupada says, if I need to change my dress in order to spread this movement, I will change my dress. Everyone loves, you see, it's you know, when you see what Prabhupada's statements became very popular and famous, and what Prabhupada's statements didn't make the cut, they kind of died on the vine. It really tells you a lot about our psychology. Because what we find is that although Prabhupada said over and over and over again that I'm prepared to make any adjustment, I'm prepared to change my dress, I'll do anything, you know, we have to adjust to the Western world, we have to do whatever it takes. Although Prabhupada said that over and over again, those statements didn't make it. You know, they never made like the top 40, you know, the tops of the pops. And yet the statements were the big, sort of swaggering, you know, Prabhupada, I didn't come to learn anything, you know, I don't give a damn what they do here. Those are the quotes devotees love. You know, and even those...
Well, this one I just happened to hear on the way to the temple this morning. It was in my CD player.
Yeah.
It was, he was talking about when he gave a presentation at a college, and the Indian says, we don't need to have anything. We need technology. So this was the response that Prabhupada.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, yeah, but that's the context. What Prabhupada was saying is that I came to give something. He said to that Indian student, you didn't come to help this country. You didn't come to offer anything to this country. What he meant by that was that you didn't come to offer knowledge. You didn't come to offer Krishna. You just come to, like a beggar to take. When Prabhupada said, I'm not a beggar, what he means is he was contrasting himself with all the Indians that were, you know, struggling to get into America just to get Western things. And Prabhupada said, I came to give something. But in order, and as far as dress, it so happens that when Prabhupada came, Indian sadhus were like this, were all the rage. It was a huge fad. And therefore, there were so many Indian gurus that became famous. I mean, Guru Maharaji filled up the Astrodome. Prabhupada couldn't have filled up the Astrodome. And Guru Maharaji, well, he was just a clown. And so the point is, Prabhupada came at a time when Indian gurus, Indian mystic traditions were a super fad. And therefore, there was no need to change anything. What we really find in the life of Prabhupada is that he always changed things if it wasn't working. For example, he went to Jhansi. It didn't work, so he left Jhansi, went to Delhi, started publishing Back to Godhead. He realizes it's not going to produce a big movement. He went to Vrindavan, did the Bhagavatam. He got his picture taken with the prime minister, but he realized in India people aren't taking that seriously. He got on a boat. He came to America. He went to Butler. And the indication is he was just going to stay in Butler. Then he realized, I can't build my movement here. He went to New York. Then he started working with Dr. Misha. He realized that doesn't work. He left Dr. Misha. So you see Prabhupada constantly adjusting. Prabhupada's a pure devotee. He's a pure devotee. He doesn't care about the body. He doesn't care about clothes. His own guru sometimes wore a Western coat. And Prabhupada said, I have a quote, it's going to be in my paper, that if it was necessary, I would do that. When Prabhupada said I'm not a beggar, he means he didn't come to get money. He didn't come to get technology. He came to give Krishna. That's what he meant.
That's very accurate. You did say one other thing. He said, I came to bring the culture, to bring culture.
Yes.
So,
Prabhupada,
What? Wearing regular clothes?
He wore like Western coat and shoes and all kinds of things that sadhus never wore. Prabhupada, if Prabhupada, but when Prabhupada said, it's a quote from Prabhupada, I am prepared to change my dress. Why isn't that as important as the other quote? Prabhupada said it. It turned out it wasn't necessary. Prabhupada said, I came within the culture. That's the culture he knew. He brought this culture. But at the same time, he urged us, and I have innumerable quotes to that effect, to change our clothes if necessary. In fact, Prabhupada personally told me that in Hawaii. In 1974, or 75 actually, I went to Honolulu to see Prabhupada, and then we flew together to LA and then to Mexico. And at that time, Sudama Swami had left. He'd been president of Honolulu. He left the movement. And someone mentioned to Prabhupada that he didn't want to wear Indian clothes. Prabhupada said, I don't care about that. I mean, there's so many quotes from Prabhupada where he says, clothes have nothing to do with the soul. Prabhupada said, clothes are a dead thing. We're not interested in clothes. We're interested in consciousness. So, what about all these quotes from Prabhupada? Why haven't those quotes become popular? Why don't devotees talk about those statements?
Could it be a centralized bureaucracy?
I think it's the fact that one of the greatest pastimes, frankly, among Vaishnavas is lording it over non-devotees.
Right. What about lording it over devotees?
Well, I found when I travel, I found like in Europe, every country I went to, I had to explain to the devotees, stop trashing your country. You happen to live in a great country. It's a devotee pastime everywhere. It's just trash the non-devotees, trash the material world. And sure, I mean, I understand our philosophy. We're not our body. It's the inferior energy of Krishna. I understand it's Kali Yuga. At the same time, even God himself reciprocates. Yeyata mam prapadyante. God himself reciprocates. So if we live in a country or in a region and we don't respect the people, how will they respect us? If we don't, for example, I was in Denmark, then devotees say, yeah, we have a terrible government. It was voted by impartial, studies to be the most honest government in the world. The most honest government in the world. And yet, for the devotees, it was just all nonsense. They were all just cheaters and rascals. So, another point I wanted to make is that in the Western world, there are many things that are much more Vedic than in India, like honest government, public cleanliness, organization, public services for the people, providing medical care, and food, and and protecting women from rape. There's all kinds of things which are actually more Vedic in the Western world, and some things obviously are more Vedic in India. But unless we learn how to respect and even admire, as Prabhupada did, those things which are respectable and admirable in the West, we cannot denigrate, insult, offend a culture and think we're going to attract it and convert it. And that's why some leaders are so attached to denigrating the West that they would rather keep on denigrating it and then just declare that we're not meant to be a big movement.
That's a good point. I have a comment. It can be in a question also. There's a difference between discussion and debate. And debate is about conquest. and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls it abominable on account of that. And discussions, they're only meant to arrive at the truth, and they're in the mode of goodness. So we're in 2015, and I don't see a forum for discussing real problems facing the movement without the threat of punishment or exclusion.
Yeah, very good point.
It's a little heavy-handed. And so we end up with sites like Sampradaya Sangh where devotees can vent themselves. So what happened to the devotee? There was a purport we just had where devotees were described by Vaishnavas, described by Prabhupada as having cool heads. So where is that? And this other point that you made is we have to accept Prabhupada's instructions as a whole rather than to cherry pick and skew things the way we want.
Exactly. I agree with everything you said. Fortunately, the GBC has now, well, it seems like they're saying that we're going to form a committee and just sit down and talk to each other. I had requested them to talk to me before they passed resolutions about me to talk to me first, but apparently that was asking too much. But now we are going to talk. So hopefully we can do it Prabhupada's way and just sit down and talk to each other and find some common ground. Because there has to be a Western within ISKCON, a Western Hare Krishna movement, and there needs to be a movement where we have the freedom to carry out so many of Prabhupada's instructions, where he urges us to make all the necessary adjustments. In his purport to 4854 in Bhagavatam, take all risks, do whatever it takes to make the movement work in the Western world, and it's not going to look exactly the same superficially as it does in India. And that's Prabhupada speaking. So anyway, thank
Maharaj,
you. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a very important question for you. When are you going to come and visit us here in Hawaii?
Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, I do want to go to Hawaii, and we also have a lot of interest in Australia and New Zealand, and so I have to put a trip together, but thank you very much. And I do want to go to Hawaii. I will go as soon as I can just recover from my last trip and get some writing done, and then hopefully we'll all see each other.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Unfortunately, I think I have to run, but is there one last point or question? No?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. We'd love to have you come on.
Yeah, thank you all very much. It's very kind of you to listen and talk to me, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Haribo. And goodbye to everyone on Ustream.